when the planets have, when they're so close and they each have their own magnetic pull, you're getting all this energy off of each planet. That energy comes in the form of lightning, plasma events, things like that. And that's where the show takes place in the sky. Mm-hmm. So we're actually approaching that same event in October 2024, about October week of 13th through the 14th, 15th, something like that. That's supposed to be the final day when everything's lined up. You also got an eclipse, which is very interesting, taking place in April. So all these different things starting to line up in what happened a long time ago.
Tinfoil Hat Club podcast. I'm Kyle.
And I'm Ben.
And thank you for joining us yet again. So we have a special guest with us today. It's actually a family member. So this is one of Ben's big brothers, because Ben is the baby of the family.
That's right.
Just like me, man. Babies got to stick together.
That's right.
The older brothers always pick on us.
Yeah, they did.
No, see, they did. You didn't say they do. They did. Yeah, there they go. So, yeah, this
Sorry
is...
about that,
our guest today is actually Joe Truitt. Now, Joe, I'm going to let him start off by kind of introducing himself and what he does. But I know we talked a little bit, as we normally do, before we hit record. And he is actually a published author a few times over. We have some fun stuff that we're going to talk about today. But I will turn it over to him, and he kind of just explain what he does and what he's been doing, and we'll go from there. So go ahead.
All right. Yeah, I'm Joe Truitt. Written 9 novels so far, and I got plenty I've started writing, but they're just halfway through. It takes a while. Probably write about 2.5 books a year.
Oh, so, wow. You got it down.
My best-selling book I wrote in 2 months.
Oh, wow.
That makes most of the money. But also in that series, actually, the 3rd and 4th book, I was doing some research on lightning. And so that's kind of where we're going today, I think, with a lot of this.
What's charged our conversation for the day?
What's charged the conversation? There you go. That's very good.
Yeah. Some fascinating stuff. We always kind of talk, obviously, before the show, and we got into a little bit upstairs, and it's so funny. We always we talk a little bit. We're like, oh man, we need to save it for the show. It's good stuff. So it was really the writing of your other book, and it sounds like that book series that you were actually writing was in fact a series.
Yes, it was a series, a 4-book series. It's called the Cookie Pirate series.
Okay,
sort of anybody can read it. It's sort of a kid's book, but believe it or not, there's a lot of older women that love that series.
Really?
For some reason. That seems to be my biggest seller to older women, I think.
Their money's good too.
Their money's good too, yes. And I appreciate every person that buys it.
Amen, brother.
Yes.
Amen.
I also did another series called Tales of Iron and Smoke, which is sort of, I would say it's sort of like if Mary Poppins and Bert the Chimney Sweep got married and had kids, and then Mary Poppins turned out evil.
Wow.
So that one's a little bit edgy. It's sort of I would say more of a diesel punk type series.
So not steampunk, but
it's not steampunk, but it's close. It's maybe a mix, I guess. That was some of the issues with that, but it's kind of throwing everything in there. Then I did, which was my newest novel, And Winter Came to Henry's World, which just published this year.
Yeah.
And sort of basically about a kid that forgets to close the back door to the house in his dreams anyway. And then after all that, it sort of happens in real life after he goes to his grandfather's house and they find a door in the woods, and then they open this door and they can't get it closed. And
interesting.
So all these creatures start coming in, and he can't get the door closed.
Interesting. So you've been writing novels now or books for how long?
Well, I guess stories. I've been writing stories for probably 10 years. Some stuff I was too afraid to publish, so I didn't.
Yeah.
Actually did a couple low budget movies, but which Ben was starring in.
And I've seen one.
Yes. During the Cookie Pirate series, I did some study on lightning because there's a character in the books called Lightning Jack. And as a child, Lightning Jack, every time he went outside, clouds would roll in and a storm would come up and he would get struck by lightning. And so...
kind of like our uncle.
Yeah, exactly.
You got an uncle that's been zapped a few times by lightning?
Yeah.
Interesting thing, me and my older son, we've actually been hit by lightning once.
Wow, really?
Cutting wood. So, yeah. So it was very interesting to start studying. And online, I learned a lot from there's a YouTube channel called the Thunderbolts Project.
Yeah.
If you want to learn a lot about lightning and plasma and all that stuff, you just check them out.
Those guys are neat.
I love all their videos. I've learned so much from. So that was one of the places that I picked up a ton of information from.
Yeah.
And so
now as you started diving into the lightning aspect of things, it seems like it's kind of gotten you further. Like it's kind of almost like a little bit of a rabbit hole.
Yeah, I went down several rabbit holes, really. And,
fun, aren't they?
Yeah. And
we may or may not go down rabbit holes on this show. So hey, you're perfect.
Thanks. Some of them, they had good information, some didn't. And I tend to look for what has factual information and what is actually historically based. And that's sort of where I ran across Judicula Rock. That was sort of my first thing in North Carolina. And it is a large rock that has a bunch of petroglyphs carved into it. They still don't really know what all these things mean. Mm-hmm. If you look at some of it, it looks like really terrible artwork. But, everybody just, thinks that a lot of the ancients that lived back then didn't have good artwork. So they're just carving all this stuff in there. It's not really the case. All these things have meaning and purpose. Mm-hmm. And so we're going to kind of get into some of that, and I'm going to hopefully show everybody that it's actually a lot more to it than just
some simple
rudimentary carving in a stone.
Yeah.
And that it has a lot to do with plasma events and lightning and lightning sprites, ball lightning. There's so many different things that were recorded on Judicula Rock. And I think the historians really missed the boat on this one because they just figured it was some sort of, low budget artwork or some such thing. But that's really not what it is. There's so much more to it. So
the historians are hanging out with the archaeologists and they're all screwing it up.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I think that's been the most fascinating thing over the last probably, I don't even know, 5 years even. How much is coming to light as we do these archaeological digs that are showing that our, accepted version of the events of the past is completely wrong.
Right.
I mean, just complete malarkey, and it makes no sense. And they actually have advanced knowledge of a lot of different things. And it sounds like in this case, we talk a lot on the show, or we have in the past, about celestial knowledge. Mm-hmm. That's a huge one that seems to come up. My first thing that I was looking at this, I'm seeing some, like when I'm looking at this picture here, a horizontal line. And by anyone that wants to look this up, it's Judicula, Judaculla rock, and it's actually in North Carolina. Mm-hmm. But are there portions of this that have any celestial knowledge at all, or is it just kind of all recording events that have happened as far as kind of the lightning and plasmic events and things like that?
Yeah, we'll kind of touch on some of that, but if everybody has a chance that's listening can pull this up and take a look at it, it's going to help as we go through some of it. There's a ton of information that you can, once you start digging into it and you start with Judicula rock, you can sort of see what's going on. Also looking up things like Squatter Man. Each one of these items that is drawn on the rock has a name, and it is specific to plasma events in the sky. So basically what was going on, you had these, Native Americans or whoever carved it. I think we do have a rough idea of about the time frame of when it happened.
Yeah, it says that the activity, and this is obviously just Wikipedia, but it says that the human activity in the area can be traced back to 2000 BC.
Yes.
So long before, what we know.
Yes. So it's been a long time. I don't know when Judicula rock was actually carved. I'm not sure anybody does.
Yeah.
So Columbus didn't discover America.
No.
Isn't that kind of funny now in hindsight that we're like, we still give him credit for that? And it's so stupid when you think of it, because it's like, homeboy got off the boat and there were people.
Yeah.
It's like, why are we giving this dude credit? It's like, clearly you were not the first one, man.
Yeah, he definitely wasn't. That's
kind of funny.
That was the power of Spain, I
Exactly.
suppose.
Yeah.
But yeah, another one to look up that is actually carved on Judicula rock is called Squatter Man. And if you want to pull that up, we can take a look at some of that. But if you just imagined in the sky, you had some plasma events. So when I say plasma, think of the aurora borealis and all the different colors and things like that you have going on. And it's just moving like waves and things like that. So if you can keep your mind on that as we're talking about this, it's going to help imagine some of this stuff. But Squatter Man is very unique in that it was carved all around the world in many different countries. So it's very, very popular, I guess, or was popular at the time. And you can see some of the artwork there, but
you can definitely tell he was a man.
Yeah, definitely. In fact, not a man at all, but a plasma event. And so you can see on your screen there, you can see how it sort of, as it starts to take shape, it morphs and there's like, it spreads out in one area and another. Well, what they were able to do was regenerate this in a lab. So they were able to actually recreate the plasma event of Squatter Man in a lab. And that's what makes it so fascinating, because what we know from that now is these ancients weren't just drawing something silly on a stone. They were drawing what they were seeing in the heavens. So they saw all these different plasma events, maybe at the same, time or same year or relatively same time, or they were documenting it throughout several years.
Yeah.
So there's so many different ones, and I would challenge anybody to look up the Thunderbolts Project, on YouTube and check out everything they have. I learned so much from that, and there's just a plethora of information there. Yeah, you could just study that all day.
What was kind of the reason they started that, and when did they start it? Any idea?
I don't know the reasoning behind it. The videos I know go back several years. Yeah. So it's they're all scientists, but more along the electrical side of things, and so they cover a broad scope of things, even as far back as Egypt, and how the Egyptians and the pyramids were using electrically charged devices to shock each other. And if you look at some of the petroglyphs from Egypt, you'll see they take different tools like the crook and things like that, and they'll be pointing it at someone's nose.
Yeah.
And they were doing that to actually shock the person. Now, not an average person, it would be like a pharaoh or someone.
Yeah.
And they would get some sort of, I guess,
a charge out of it.
A charge. Yes. They would get some sort of benefit from being shocked, whatever that might be. But another thing that they point out is the stones have small shapes cut inside them where all the stones connect, where you could fit a brass piece inside that, and that would help charge from one stone to the next. And they're all made that way.
Yeah.
which is really fascinating.
So it seems like they had a lot more, and it's kind of funny that we're talking about this because I think, again, you go back over the last 5-10 years, and as we start digging more and more into the Egyptian, especially the pyramids, it sure seems like a lot more information is coming to light that these were not crypts. They were designed for some kind of energy purpose.
Right. Yeah, and I don't know. I have some theories on some of that that we could go into maybe at some point.
Sure,
There's so much more to some of the simple things that the ancients were doing.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times they don't get a lot of credit. But imagine, if you would, for a moment, staring up at the sky in today's time. You're just out in your backyard at night, maybe grilling some burgers or something like that, and having a good time with your family. And, all of a sudden you see something take shape in the sky that is the form of Squatter Man.
Yeah.
And you've never seen anything like this. And it looks like a man.
Yeah, it does. It's really
you would
weird.
probably think God is coming down to earth. And when in reality, it is a plasma event.
Yeah.
And now, if you look at some of the other ones, some of them look like giant centipedes, but that's not what they are at all. Yeah. So it's just different levels of these plasma events taking place. So that's why there's so many different shapes on Judicula Rock. So all the different things, and there's even one that looks like owl eyes, and like a big circle that starts vibrating and everything in the sky. So there's so much to that. There's one that NASA just got a picture of, and I can't remember. It's like a blue flame. It was recently in the news. I can't recall what the actual name of it, but it's like a blue bolt that shoots down from the heavens, and it actually opened up a hole.
Like in the ozone?
Yes. So it opened up this, something. It opened up like a big hole there. And believe it or not, they actually recorded that on the rock.
Interesting. So at some point that must have happened before.
It happened before. But the NASA photos obviously are a lot more dramatic, and they're in full color.
Right.
So very interesting stuff there.
Is that all that there is on the rock? Is it just this stuff, or is there other things too?
It's just all these plasma events.
That's it.
Some of the rock has been washed away, and things like that.
Yeah, because it's
been there a long time in the rain. So it's amazing that it is still intact as it is. I know some people sometimes go put graffiti on it, which is a shame, but
of course they do.
I guess that's the kind of stuff that you have to deal with when you document this on a rock.
You got to protect the Mona Lisa, the Judicula Rock, and the Declaration of Independence.
Exactly.
From
there's
Yellow
actually
Tang. I don't know.
There's even lightning sprites carved in, if you can see.
Yeah.
So these are lightning sprites here. So down there in the corner, it looks sort of like an octopus, but what would that have looked like if it was not, hadn't rained on it for so many years?
Sure.
The original form.
It's still pretty.
Still pretty close.
Yeah, pretty clear, right? I mean, now, my first question is, we're going through this and looking at the time frame of all this, because I'm just deathly curious. Do you even know if there are a lot of mounds around here?
Yeah, there are actually a lot of, especially in Indiana and Illinois.
Yes.
There's actually a very large
network of
civilization. It was actually sort of based more in Illinois, but it was a very large nation. They spread all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico. And I don't recall the name of the tribe, but...
and we're talking Indian, it seems
Sort of. These people are actually conscripted by Cortez when he went against Montezuma. So they were conscripted, and they were very tall people, and they were very good warriors, and they had a massive nation. Well, a lot of these people died in that battle.
Could they be giants?
I don't know. Well, couldn't go that
or way. Descendants of.
But yeah,
possibly.
So yeah, there was a massive amount of people here, but
yes, Ben.
Yeah. So yes, they were tall. I don't know exactly how tall, but yes, they were supposedly taller.
Yeah,
than your average person.
It seems to vary, like when they've got into these mounds or at any point. They could be 6.5 feet tall, and I've heard even much larger than that. So, but strange. But it's just curious because it seems like from an age perspective, do you think it was maybe some of these civilizations that probably did this?
That's,
speculation. It's not saying
this would be further towards north. This is in North Carolina, so this is a little bit further away. So it would have been someone, but probably not that nation that's located here in Indiana. But Indiana does have a lot of history, very ancient history. The statement that Abraham Lincoln made about being with the
isn't that wacky?
Walking with the land of the giants and seeing their bodies and all that. Crazy? That's crazy, but anyway, to get us back on track here.
Sorry, man.
That's all
right.
We're
going to do it to you. You're going to keep us in check.
So he is. He's not going to let it.
I'm going to keep you in check. So and the reason I kind of start out with Judicula Rock and why it's so significant is I know we don't really have a time frame on when it happened, but we do know that in 79 AD, there were a lot of events that took place. And if you remember, Mount Vesuvius blew its top.
Did that happen in 79 AD?
79 AD. Pompey was wiped out. And something else was taking place during that time, but it was actually up in space. And what was happening was the planets were aligning in such a way, I believe some people call it the tree of life alignment, where the Earth is in the middle of the four gas giants, and it's basically being squeezed. So the different magnetic fields between the Earth and those planets is basically causing all this stress on the Earth. So you get all these eruptions with volcanoes, earthquakes, mud floods, things like that. All the ancients, Tacitus wrote all about this stuff in some of his writings and the different wars that took place and all the things, the famines and everything from 43 to I think 64 AD. So there's a whole lot going on before we hit that major time frame in 79 AD where the Earth was finally in the center of all those gas giants, and then that was kind of like the culmination. So I think something was going on in the sky as well.
So I
think that's where they started recording all this stuff all around the world. So you got Squatterman showing up because basically when the planets have, when they're so close and they each have their own magnetic pull, you're getting all this energy off of each planet. That energy comes in the form of lightning, plasma events, things like that. And that's where the show takes place in the sky. Mm-hmm. So we're actually approaching that same event in October 2024, be about October week of 13th through the 14th, 15th, something like that. That's supposed to be the final day when everything's lined up. You've also got an eclipse, which is very interesting, taking place in April. Yeah. So all these different things starting to line up in what happened a long time ago. I'm very curious to see, are we going to see Squatterman in the sky? Are we going to see, we've already seen lightning sprites in Texas. They're fairly common there. The Aurora Borealis, how far down is it going to go? I mean, this was in North Carolina when they didn't move that rock. They drew that stuff right there when it was happening. So they saw all this stuff clear down there. Right. So how much of that stuff is going to come down that far? I don't know.
Interesting to see.
But it would be interesting to see. How much is going to happen? I have no idea.
Do you think maybe some of the things that we're trying to throw into the camp of global warming are actually due to this kind of solar cyclical event?
I suppose that's possible.
I mean, if we're in a situation where it's impacting gravity on the Earth and squeezing the Earth effectively, right? I would think that would cause a lot of potential problems, and it would manifest itself in a way where people would go, "Oh, it's global warming."
Could be,
not to get political with it because that's not what we're trying to do here. But I could easily see that some of these things get thrown into that camp, and it's actually kind of a just normal process event that happens as the Earth goes around the sun for however many 2,000 years.
I think there's roughly a lot of things that I think it's just exactly what this is, we don't know because no one living has ever experienced it. How far is it going to be identical to what happened in 79 AD? I don't know.
Yeah.
We just don't know. I think some things that are happening right now on the earth are probably tied to this. I would say, we do tend to get a lot of volcanic eruptions anyway. I think there's somewhere between 60 and 80 per year throughout the planet, so I'm not necessarily saying they're going to increase or anything, but it could be something very dramatic, like the Tonga eruption, which was massive. And the cloud that came from that, it was just huge. The thing is, it's so far south, nobody really kind of pays attention to it, but it was massive.
Oh man, the shots from space were incredible.
Yes. And
incredible of that.
So, that's very interesting.
The one in Mexico City, close to
the one in Mexico City. And like I say, we always get...
Yeah, that's becoming active, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I've seen that in the news.
Gabe's been down there since January.
I thought of him.
He's been taking photos of it, like just smoking.
Right.
He'll go see it from
that area, too, is extremely seismically sensitive because Mexico City is actually in a bowl.
Yeah.
So whenever they have an earthquake, it not to scare the crap out of you because your kid's down there, but whenever they have anything like that, it makes it amplifies the intensity of the earthquake because it's in a bowl. So it's kind of interesting as you were talking because I doing some other research here recently. Also in October of this year is actually the 70th Jubilee, the Jewish Jubilee, the 70th Jubilee celebration of that, which is just interesting from a timing perspective in October. And we were talking upstairs how this kind of ties into the book of Matthew, right? When Christ is, I think it's Matthew 24 actually,
right?
Which I've been referencing a whole lot lately.
We read that last week.
It's been a lot.
Yeah. So. Matthew, and I probably have a little bit different view than most people on Matthew 24 than the standard Christian viewpoint. I know a lot of people tend to lean towards a dispensational premillennial view where a lot of that stuff hasn't happened yet, but that is really, you have to go back to the original language to really dig into that and see exactly what was being said. So that gets a little tricky because the question that was asked, the way Jesus answered it was, he did not say the end of the world or cosmos. He said aeon, which is the end of the age.
Yeah, I forget we looked it up the other day because there was we referenced the CJB a lot, the Complete Jewish Bible. He and I really like a lot. And if there's no good English word for it or no other language translational, it will leave the original Hebrew.
Yeah, it just says Olama Hazak.
Yeah. Which actually, when you look that up.
I don't know anything for as far as the New Testament goes, they all spoke Greek. Mm-hmm. So that's why it was all translated in Greek. And that was sort of the purpose of Alexander the Great.
This was left in the Hebrew.
For the New Testament?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they translated it, obviously.
But they have to translate it from Greek to Hebrew.
Well, no, I think what this particular author, when you read the footnotes in the front of the book, he actually is a Hebrew linguist and has been for quite a while. And he originally translated the New Testament, I think, from, well, obviously, he had to have had it in Greek because it was when it was.
Yeah, you had to go from Greek to Hebrew.
You got to go from
Hebrew they don't have as many vowels. That's what I'm saying. The purpose of Alexander the Great, who was the fast-moving Greek goat in the book of Daniel, was to conquer the earth, set the language as one language, but it was a language with vowels because they did not have vowels in the Hebrew language. So it was a easier way to understand for everyone. So to really get the gist of what's going on, you really need a Greek lexicon to find out exactly what Jesus was saying in a lot of these things and what words he was using. So in Matthew chapter 13, he uses the word cosmos, which is the end of all things.
Yeah.
Okay. But what he's talking about there is when the end comes. But in Matthew 24, he never uses the word cosmos. He uses the word aeon, which is the end of the age. But
yeah, no, that's similar to what I'm trying to find the.
I think I sent the definition to you.
Yeah, it's funny. I looked it up right after our show too. I think it was last week or the week before. And
now that you brought that up,
see, there you go. Set you up perfect.
Here you go. Yeah. So after all these, if you're looking at it from a biblical perspective, in Matthew 24, you go through and you read all the way to verse 27. It says, "For as lightning that comes from the east is visible in the west, so it will be the coming of the Son of Man. Wherever there is a carcass, there the vultures will gather." Okay? So that he's talking about all this stuff that's going to happen, the fall of the temple, Jerusalem, all that stuff. And then he says, immediately after the distress in those days, the sun will be darkened, eclipse, okay?
Yeah.
The moon will not give its light, and the stars will fall from the sky, and the heavenly bodies will be shaken. So after 70 AD and the fall of the temple and all that,
which is what Christ is predicting earlier.
Which is what he's predicting. Yeah. 9 years later, the planets line up, and all these things start happening. You get all these earthquakes, all these different things. You had famines. So many things took place during that time. So it was after 70 AD that it occurred, which is interesting. So a lot of times you think, well, wouldn't this happen first? Like, I love Apocalypto, but the Mel Gibson movie. And so, when Jaguar Paul's going up there and he's like, I'm not going to die today. And they put him on the thing and they're going to kill him. And then you get the eclipse and he's like, okay, I guess the sun god is satisfied, so we won't cut his head off, and they set him free. Mm-hmm. Well, in this case, what's actually happening is the terrible things all happened first, and then all this stuff came about, which is interesting because historically, when you look at this in the Bible, you had the fall of Babylon, same language. The moon will be darkened, or the sun will be dark, the moon won't give its light. Then you had the fall of Edom, same thing as Isaiah 34.
Those dirty Edomites.
Yeah, exactly. So it was like Isaiah 13 was the fall of Babylon. Isaiah 34 was the fall of Edom. Ezekiel, I think maybe 36 was the fall of Egypt. Mm-hmm. All the same language used. So Jesus uses the same for the fall of Jerusalem. He says, I want to use the same language that was used in Scripture so you know what's going to happen. And what's going to happen is the fall of a nation. So when you just use Scripture to translate Scripture, and that's all you use, you don't bring anything else in, it really opens up a doorway for really understanding what's going on.
It's kind of fascinating. It's so interesting to me that all these things are happening now.
Yes, it is. We live in very significant times, but I do not have an answer for you on all that stuff.
Well, we don't have an answer either, but we got some suspicions of some things that might be going on, and they ain't good.
They ain't good. But let's look at this for a second. So if you go to Genesis 37,
okay,
I believe it is verse 9 and 10. I'll do that myself just to make sure I'm right.
Okay, I'm there. I can read it for you.
I do forget.
So it looks like this is maybe Joseph.
Joseph, yes.
Yeah, we're having a dream.
He's having a dream. Mm-hmm. If you want to read it, that's fine.
Yeah, so you said 9 and 10? Mm-hmm. All right, he had another dream, which he told his brothers, and I'm reading from the CJB again. Here I had another dream, and there were the sun, the moon, and 11 stars prostrating themselves before me. He told his father too, as well as his brothers, but his father rebuked him. What is this dream you have had? Do you really expect me, your mother, and your brothers to come and prostrate ourselves before you on the ground? Which is exactly what his brothers did.
They did, yes.
We need food.
Yes, exactly. So now I want you to look at this in a different light, okay? So we know the heavenly bodies, there's something significant that goes on there, and it seems to be happening this year too. But also, in a new and different way, who is the sun? There's the father. And the mother was the moon. And who are the children? The children are stars. So when Jesus is describing this, the stars will fall. He's talking about the children. The stars are the heroes of the nation. So when you look at the Old Testament, it says the stars will fall. Your stars will fall. the stars, were basically fall from the heavens.
Yeah.
So it's sort of a sign of when is a nation going to fall. So you can look at this and you can say, okay, how many of our stars do we have? Our movie stars, our football stars, all the different stars, who are the great stars? There aren't that many anymore.
Yeah.
There really aren't. So I think it's significant because many times in Scripture, and there's a lot more. I think if you go to Philippians chapter 2, and the verse escapes me, it also calls God's people stars.
So Philippians 2:15. So I'll read that too. So that you may be blameless and pure children of God, without defect in the midst of a twisted and perverted generation, among whom you shine like stars in the sky.
Okay. And then Jude 1:13.
Oh man, we're getting some good Bible study jump around today too. Jude. Oh, Jude, I love you, Jude. Yeah.
Don't
Simple.
sing, "Hey Jude." Don't do it.
I'm not going to do it, man.
I got a
I'm not going to
coffee
do it.
cup here, and it's
I'm
loaded.
not going to do it, dude.
No.
Jude 1:13, you say? Mm-hmm. Savage sea waves heaving forth their shameful deeds like foam, wandering stars for whom the blackest darkness has been reserved forever. Now, to put that in context, we're talking about the bad people at the end of
Yes, but they're all
the
God's
day.
children and they're stars.
Yeah.
That's the thing. There's two ways to view in Revelation when it says that a third of the stars were swept from the sky. I want you to look at that in two different ways. It's commonly thought by a lot of people that Satan swept a third of the angels out.
Joined him in the war in heaven. Yeah.
Exactly. But there's another way to look at that, okay? And that is that a third of all of the Hebrew children were wiped out by Herod, okay? As he was trying to do what? He was trying to get to the child, trying to kill the child. And if you notice, the stars are gone before the war happens. So, okay, it could be Satan or it could be all the babies that were killed, because who was doing the killing? Who do we know had the sword? It was Satan had the sword. Herod was just an instrument.
Yeah,
okay?
he was trying to stamp out.
So yes, there's
the
two
child, 'cause
ways
he was
to
told
look
in
at that.
Genesis he knew that he had to watch out for a child to be born.
That's right. There's two ways to look at that. You can look at it one way, and you can say it was Satan, or you can look at it another way. You can say it was the Hebrew babies, or you can look at it another way, and you can say the stars are children, and they're all children.
Yeah.
So something significant happened, and it could have been both. Sometimes I think there's possibilities of a dual explanation to something in Scripture, especially when you're looking at something that's prophecy. So it's a little bit, I would just challenge you to give that a little more, credence,
It's
as
almost
you're reading.
cyclical.
Yeah.
No, I'm being no.
No,
it's true.
yeah. Well,
It's
some things, and then you're getting into Revelation, which I don't want to deviate too far because
No.
that's a whole other topic. But
but
I do believe that what we're headed into with all this in the planet alignment, and I don't know why it's called the Tree of Life. Honestly, I don't. It's just, I think
It's an interesting choice of words.
it's
too,
an
is it
interesting
not?
choice of words, but it's happened before, so I don't fully understand that. But
Yeah.
that's what they call it now, is the Tree of Life. Supposedly, there's a lot of different things that occur when the planets align like
did this
that.
happen? Did they know if it happened during Exodus?
No, that's another good question. But thanks for bringing that up, because that brings me to
Look at this.
another
It's like
thing.
slow pitch softball.
That kind of brings me back to the Egyptians and everything that they did, and basically Moses, who was chosen. Okay, and it's possible these things could align this. I never did the math on how many times this happened, but we just know that it is a significant event. Somehow it's significant.
Well, we would have to say significant, or I would say cyclical. I mean, it has to be.
Well, anything that we're talking about like this, because they're on a fixed rotational path, would be cyclical, right? And like
It is,
we could
yes.
use the math to actually figure up minus
We could
the
figure
space
that.
between
It's something I didn't
79
do.
79 AD and today, which whatever the math. You guys go ahead and talk.
I was
I'll
just
math.
writing a book trying to figure out how this guy gets shocked by lightning all the time. Okay, I was just
Look
trying
what
to
happened.
give some credence to it. But
Let me ask you a question. I don't want to get in the weeds on this, but do you feel like that's kind of maybe a divine intervention there in some ways, that God wanted you to go down some of these roads, even though you were planning X and you went down Y?
Possibly.
It's kind of fun. I mean, like, you don't know for sure, right? But like,
it's probably always wondering why I'm going down rabbit holes, not paying attention, reading the Bible.
I don't know. It sounds like you've been reading the Bible more than you may be giving yourself credit for there, brother.
Yeah, I'd originally went to school a long time ago for it was drawing a blank here on drawing a blank on what I went to school for.
You must have been good.
What were you doing at that school?
It was for literature, like ancient literature, things like that, and I bailed out of it. So I never finished. So that was why I was kind of
so you're like 95% of the other people on the planet.
I was kind of a loser on all that, but it did instill in me a desire to read a lot of ancient texts and things like that, and that's where I sort of got caught up in Josephus. That was like the first one outside of the Bible that I started reading, and things like that, and it was a lot of fun, and so I just sort of always gravitated towards what did everybody else say, in the Book of Enoch and things like that. And you just kind of dig into all these things because you want to know more and you want to see how much is factual. And it's difficult to tell on some of that stuff. I do like Josephus because we do know it was history, even though he kind of gets a bad rap. But he was there for a lot of the things that he wrote down. And it's worth giving that some...
No, I definitely want to dig into some of that. By the way, just for fun, I did the math really quick. If the math would hold true, which you would think that it would because it's very cyclical, like you kind of mentioned, Ben, 1866 BC.
Okay, I'd have to see.
Yeah, I don't know what different. I was just kind of looking. I was kind of looking to see if anything.
The Exodus was actually 1446.
Because it's the 13th century. So yeah.
The reason I say that, and I know a lot of people probably disagree with me if they're talking to somebody that went to a Bible college or something, but archaeologically, from what I have learned from a lot of different people, it was really around 1446. And the reason why, there's actually a statement in 1 Kings, I think chapter 6, that actually says 480 years.
Yeah.
They started to build the temple. So when you go back 480 years, at 1446, you arrive at Egypt when Thutmose III was Pharaoh. So it's Thutmose III, who was the brother of Hatshepsut, who was Pharaoh's daughter, who found Moses.
Interesting.
So yeah,
so you can kind of run the lineage on that to get decent math.
You can, yes,
yeah, right,
yes. And another thing that's very significant: Thutmose III had the largest army that Egypt had ever had, and now maybe Ramses the Great was greater, or maybe he just had better people writing better stories about him. I don't know. But Ramses, the city, was actually there long before Ramses ever was born.
Yeah.
So it was a city, and he was named after the city. Maybe he came from there or some such thing. I don't know. But Thutmose III was actually the Pharaoh of the Exodus, and he's the only Pharaoh, when they exhumed him, that he had scars all over his body, which would have been from the boils.
That makes sense.
Now, here's what's very interesting about that, and I'm getting sidetracked now. See?
No, this is good.
No.
It's an hour and a half show, man. Just go crazy.
Thutmose III was actually the firstborn, okay? So he should have died. The reason he didn't die was because Hatshepsut accepted Moses as her son. And Moses was actually accepted as the firstborn because of this in that lineage, because Hatshepsut's father was, drawing a blank on his name, so many different pharaohs. But anyway, what was supposed to happen was Moses was supposed to take the throne of Egypt as the firstborn. But even though he was adopted, the people of Egypt accepted him as the firstborn. And Thutmose was accepted as the second son in the lineage. So think of how really offensive that would be to him that when all the firstborn died, he didn't die. That was God saying, not only does Egypt not accept you as the firstborn, but I don't either.
Oof.
So that's pretty brutal. But that's also the reason why Moses was able to walk in there with Aaron and no army and no one laid a hand on him, was because everyone in there knew Thutmose III, who was sitting on the throne, was not the true Pharaoh. The true Pharaoh was standing before Thutmose III and saying, let my people go.
Oof.
So it's very tricky. I think the whole nation was unsure what to do because they all accepted the fact that Moses was the right guy. So that's why they didn't kill him. Nobody laid a hand on him because he was actually the heir to the throne.
Oh, wow.
Very, very tricky stuff there. But I go into that because Moses was sent to Egypt and all this because he was going to be the one given the blueprints for the Ark of the Covenant. Now, if you think about all the different things, and you can just look up some of that stuff on the Egyptians and everything they did with electricity and power-based equipment and things like that, Moses was given this blueprint to build this ark by God. He spent 40 years of his life learning how to do all this stuff with electricity and how to charge these devices and things like that. How do you charge the equipment? It was like gold, it was brass, all these different things that they carried. The headdress is sort of shaped like something that would actually emanate some sort of power. And you always had these two serpents coming out. You know, everything had points. It's like an Antiquitech type thing that they were using for power. Well, if you look at the design of the Ark of the Covenant, you had two things coming up, two angels, they're pointing wings.
Gold.
And you couldn't touch it.
Yeah.
The priests had to carry it with poles. Nobody touched it. Except for Uzzah, one of Joshua's people, and he was toasted.
Fried him like a tater tot.
Fried him. Touched it, and he was trying to save it, but you can't touch it.
Yeah.
It was charged.
Oh, wow. Isn't gold like one of the best conductors of electricity that there is?
It is a very good conductor, yes.
Yeah. And haven't they found that a lot of, as they've dug into history now, they're highly suspect that the pyramids originally had gold caps on them.
It's possible. You may be right on that. I have not searched it. I knew they had something gold or brass. I wasn't sure.
I think
but
they were also originally encased in marble.
Didn't the Great Pyramid the same dimensions in the inside?
The Earth.
No, the same dimensions. Like there's the one hole is the same dimensions as the Ark of the Covenant. It would fit perfectly.
Wow. That I don't know. But I have another speculation on some of that stuff as far as this is purely speculation on the pyramids themselves, but they never really found any bodies in the Great Pyramids.
Yeah. No.
So maybe they were capacitor banks, something like that. But around the Great Pyramids, there were 11 buildings that looked like storehouses, and they found grain in all of those buildings, and they had a very small doorway there. So that brings me back to, just thinking about, okay, was this something that Joseph actually built
to
prepare for the 7-year famine, right?
Yeah.
So
they had to store it somewhere, right?
Yeah. Why the 11 buildings, very small door, all those things actually were electrically charged. If you look at some of those buildings, they have these little nubs sticking out. So, what was going on with that? Did they actually know of a way to preserve grain for 7 years? And is that what these 3 big pyramids were these great big antenna, whatever, that was somehow purifying grain? So you think about your farmers, they got their big grain bins. They have to exhaust all that heat, because it'll just blow up. It'll be like a bomb.
Yeah.
So did they find a way to discharge all of that and prevent the grain from blowing up? So was this whole thing with the pyramids and the storehouses, was this done by would have been Zaphanephaneah in the Hebrew, Joseph, or I think in the Egyptian language, Imhotep? Yeah. So was that who it was? Was it Imhotep that did
It's interesting that you said there was 11.
Yeah.
Grain storehouses.
Yes, there was 11.
What's sticking out to you about 11?
His brothers.
Oh, yeah. We talked about, did it say 11 earlier stars?
Yeah.
I think it did, didn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So he wasn't only thinking about the country, he was thinking about his family.
It's exactly what he was doing.
Yeah.
He wanted it back. He wanted his family back. So when they did come for grain, he was a little unprepared for it, but that's another topic. But
he was emotionally not prepared.
Yeah, keeping on topic with all this.
There is kind of I need a minute to figure out how I want to play this one.
Yeah.
in the story there, you can definitely read that. Yeah. Wow. So this is crazy. Do you think the Egyptians built the pyramids? Do you think they inherited them? Hard to say, right? I mean, it's just speculation. We don't know.
What's very interesting is during the time of Joseph, when he was in prison, it was actually the Egyptians who were running Egypt. What happened was the Egyptians lost the war with Hyksos kings. So when the Hyksos kings came in, they, sort of related to Joseph because he was, a nomadic guy from, basically a shepherd king. The Hyksos kings were shepherd kings. So they could kind of relate. And I think, that was why he was able to get out of that and begin to do all this. It all worked in his favor. But once Joseph was gone and the Hyksos kings lost their spot, that's why it says a king, they didn't know who they were. And that's who put them into.
I know there's a lot of speculation of who it could be, but I mean, where they came from. They're definitely not your neighbor.
Yeah. They were in slavery. I probably get this wrong. It's something like,
it wasn't very long.
It wasn't very long. They were in Egypt for like 400 years, but they weren't in slavery very long. It may have been one generation.
Yeah, it was right. I want to think 100 years or something.
I was thinking somewhere around 60, but I don't want to say because that number.
Well, you say 100. I mean,
it was at least a full generation of people.
Yeah, but not like
Yeah, but it wasn't 400 years. A lot of people tend to get that 400-year number and they think, they were in slavery for 400 years.
Because Paul says, gives you the markers from like Abraham to that. Who was it? Was it when they went into the promised land? That was the markers for when they were in bondage or something. I think Paul says that somewhere.
Could be.
I think Hebrews maybe. Not Hebrew. I don't know.
You'd have to dig that one up for me.
Yeah, I know.
I just got a phone.
That's the thing, man. I mean, like you could literally spend the rest of your life reading the Bible, and there's literally so much in there, and so many, like you've talked about, like we've talked about on the show before, so many circular references to things, and for us from our Western civilization, we miss it.
Yeah,
we didn't live the life of a BC or early first century AD Hebrew. We just didn't. So we don't understand the customs. We don't understand the culture. We don't really have a good grasp on the history. We don't even have a good grasp on the geography a lot of times. I mean, I speak from, I'm guilty, right? I got to go look things up. We were talking about, the Temple Mount and the Dome of the Rock and the Mount of Olives. And I've never been to Jerusalem. I don't know where that stuff is. So I had to literally go on Google Earth and, and kind of look geographically where we're talking about, West Bank. What does that mean? All these things. We just don't understand that. Mm-hmm. To them, it's, makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
But to us, it's just kind of lost.
Mm-hmm.
So the other question that I have, and this is again, just to get your take and your theory. Where do you think that the knowledge of some of this technology went to? Where did we lose it?
Your guess is as good as mine.
Yeah, it's so crazy, isn't it?
It was lost, but
Smithsonian?
Yeah. In a box that Indiana Jones guys took from me.
I thought the same thing. The scene at the end where the swastika gets burned onto the side, just like every other box in there.
Yeah. I don't know. I think we did lose a lot of technology, but I think also...
Do you think Tesla was aware of it, could use it?
There is a lot of stuff about Tesla kind of tapping into
the
all
ether.
This stuff, and tapping into something. He definitely pointed out a lot of the things with Egypt that is really interesting. I don't know how in depth that goes, but that's an interesting thing.
Yeah,
but
well, it sure seems they did everything they could to sabotage the guy. I know that.
Yeah, I know,
especially Edison. Because, clearly he had a better system, and Edison was the better businessman. And so it's like, dude, I'm going to torpedo you.
I think Tesla's biggest flaw was he was wanting to give it all away for free in a
that'll
world
always
that
get
was
you
a
in trouble.
capitalistic
Yeah,
world.
right.
Always get you in trouble.
But yeah, I do think a lot of the buildings, and I get some of this from some other people that, I don't know, different books that I bought.
Beauty of a book.
Yeah. I do think some of the buildings actually in the past, I don't know that I believe the dates on some of them, but if you look at the tops of them, there's all sorts of what you would call antiquitech at the top.
Are you talking about like Egyptian?
No, I'm talking about buildings here, even in the United States and things.
Yeah.
I think maybe a few hundred years ago, we still had some of this technology, and it was taken away for the purpose of
Capitalism.
Capitalism taking over some of that. For the same reason that Tesla was not allowed to give everything away for free. But I think the Egyptians were able to transfer power without wires, and I think that was going on some time back. Now, what they were doing with that, I don't know. And how many civilizations were actually doing that, I don't know. But if you look at some of the stuff that they were doing, they definitely knew electricity was something they could harness. And what were they harnessing it for?
Yeah.
I don't believe that Benjamin Franklin discovered electricity. Obviously, the Egyptians discovered it long before he did.
I think he gets the same kind of credit that Columbus gets.
Yeah. Exactly. But history's written by the winners and the people who are, but you know how that goes. But yeah, there was we've forgotten more than we remember.
It seems like it's have you watched anything with Graham Hancock at all? Do you have Netflix or anything?
No.
So there's some really good stuff out there. Like we've referenced him on the show before, but Graham Hancock he comes at everything from an agnostic perspective, which, of course I have my feelings on faith, but it's refreshing because it's not coming with any kind of slant, right? He's literally coming from the perspective of, I just want to know what the truth is. And he's actually a journalist who he's probably better than any archaeologist at this point because he's been doing it for 40 years at this point. He's gone around to all these places around the world. And he was a journalist that was fascinated with prehistory. And as he's gone to these locations and these sites, what he's found is it's like the accepted modern archaeological, nonsense is just that. It's such a joke. It doesn't even hold a candle to reality. All of these hunter-gatherer primitive ancestor is a bunch of malarkey. I mean, the whole show today and everything that we're finding shows completely the opposite. They were able to do things that we don't know how they did it.
Right.
Like we have no idea today how they built the pyramids. We have some cockamamie ridiculous theory, but when it doesn't hold up, when somebody tries to do it, we have no idea whoever built them or how they built them.
We can't even move the stones.
No,
that they moved.
Not without some kind of special equipment.
Exactly.
Yeah, we can't.
Yeah, there was a story a while back about they were trying to move some stone. I think it was from California to I can't remember where it was from. They had to actually build a special truck for it,
right?
And not only that, but they had to build the bed around the stone to actually haul it. And it wasn't anywhere near the weight of any of these things in Egypt.
Isn't that nuts?
And that was how we did it today.
Yeah.
So how did they do it back then?
Yeah, we had to build special and cut it perfectly.
Yeah.
And we see that all over the world, right? Like you go, I'd love to go to some of these places. Like Machu Picchu comes to mind. Like you go look at the stone cutting that was done, how these stones fit perfectly. I mean, they are perfect. They're so perfect, they don't even need any kind of mortar between them. They're completely watertight without any kind of mortar.
See, every rock has water. Everything has water. So do rocks. I had a job once working for a concrete company. And we would actually bake rocks, right? So we bake all the moisture out.
Yeah.
What was left was a super light stone. So were the Egyptians able to use electricity to somehow charge this massive stone to suck out all the moisture? Once they get it in place, then they pour water on and it's heavy.
Oh, well, that's kind of fascinating idea.
So I don't know. That's just
that kind of made me think of another question for you. During your study of any of this stuff, have you ever come across anything that has to do with frequency or resonance of any kind?
Yes, I've done some of that, but I didn't really go down that too far. But
Have you found any of it in this research that you've done with the celestial alignment and any of that of what it maybe causes frequency wise on the Earth?
Supposedly,
oh, he's grinning. This is good. I went a good place.
nah. I'm not sure how much of it I buy, but supposedly when this all happens, it is supposed to change some of the things in the electromagnetic field that will, alter frequencies, alter things to where people can be more conscious of certain things, and possibly it sort of pulls the veil back temporarily, so people can see things they would normally see, possibly increase telepathy, things like that. But I'm not sure I buy all that. But anyway, that's why I avoided that part of it. There's a lot of different things there that, yes, supposedly when this happened, there's supposed to be a lot of different things that take place. But
it's interesting because the reason I asked that is because we've talked so much about Egypt and how did they do that, and it seems to be one of the another one of the theories out there that we seemingly are starting to figure out again. And I think there's some things in the works that are actually going to be coming to light and have already come to light, but they're going to be coming to light in from a more commercial perspective, is the ability to tap into frequency resonance and manipulate objects and manipulate things based on frequency resonance.
To move the stones,
to move the stones. But I know, like there was a guy that is working with, I think, Mazda to create a completely partless engine.
Yeah.
It's all just literally done with harmonics.
Yeah, I've heard this.
Yeah.
An engineer told me that.
As far as the Egyptians go, I don't know how much. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of information on that, but I don't know how much of that I would say they were doing, because everything seems to be more electric.
Yeah.
Everything the Egyptians were doing, it had some sort of charged based thing to it. In fact, there's areas where the pharaoh would go, and if you look at some of the petroglyphs, that are carved out, you can see they're using things in a very electric or plasma or in some way to connect with electricity.
Yeah.
So you can you pull all that stuff up on the internet and look at it, and nobody talks about that.
No.
Because archaeologists, what do? They dig dirt and look at things, and they go, wow, look at this. I found this thing here, and isn't it great? And they have no idea. But when you have some guy who studied electricity his whole life, and he looks at it and he goes, wow, why were they shocking themselves on the nose with the crook and all that? It's like, what were they doing that for? It's like, well, that's not what they're doing. Yeah, it is. Look at that. I mean, it's obvious what they're doing.
Yeah.
And we live in a very electric world. Everything is electric. The human body has electricity. Everything has some sort of electricity
charge to it.
Yeah, there is a charge to everything. You're getting really charged up here about that word. Sorry.
Puns are welcome here. It's okay.
But if you,
I'm shocked by this information myself. I couldn't let it go, man. Sorry. Go ahead.
That's all right. Everything has some sort of charge.
Yeah.
This is one of the things that nobody ever talks about when it comes to the comet. Everybody talks about the comets that could possibly come, and destroy the Earth. You've got Armageddon, popular movie, really cool movie where they got to fly up there and drill through the meteor,
and get to ride the nuclear warhead.
Yeah, exactly. And but a comet is just an electrically charged meteor, is all it is, and it has this massive plasma glow around it, so you can see that, right? Mm-hmm. So in 1908 in Russia, in Siberia, there was a gigantic explosion, and no one knew exactly what happened with all that, okay? They looked for fragments, but they couldn't find it. Everybody says it's a comet. Nobody could figure out what it was. There was no stone. There was no impact crater. Some of the trees around the center were not even burned. The rest of the trees were burned, and they were all laid out in a circular pattern, and those were burned. There was a guy who survived that, and he was talking about what happened there. I think I got a little bit of that somewhere, but I don't remember if I kept his. I didn't keep it. But what was his name?
I know the event. I've looked it
Yeah.
up before. Is the Tunguska event?
Tunguska event. That's exactly right.
I've looked this up before. It's fascinating.
Yeah, it is.
And they just had not terribly long ago.
Can't find his name.
They had another one that that people had dash cams and stuff, and was kind of in that same area.
Yeah. What in the Thunderbolts project, they have a really good explanation for all of this. Okay, because
3 to 5 megaton.
Yes, it was a massive explosion. I think
Hiroshima was what? A kiloton?
Yeah, it was like 60,000 trees, something like that, were gone. And it just cleared out. And of course, not that many people live there.
Yeah, it's
there's
Siberia,
one guy that
thankfully.
did live there. He experienced it, and he said his body got so hot, and he was just burning up. And he thought he was going to die. It was burning through his shirt and everything.
Oh wow!
And they actually interviewed this guy, because it was 1908. They still had reporters. People went there and did tons of research on it. There were these tiny little balls everywhere in the trees. And it was like glass balls. Now, what forms glass when it strikes?
Sand, typically.
Lightning.
Oh, yeah, that's true, yeah.
Lightning gets so hot, boom, and it'll just turn stuff to glass.
Yeah.
It's instantaneous.
Yeah.
So what happened was there was a comet going by Earth during this time, and it had this massive plasma plume around it, okay? The Earth has within itself its own protective measures against comets that nobody talks about. But the Earth actually sent a bolt at the comet to prevent the comet from striking Earth. And the resulting explosion was a big explosion on Earth.
The Tunguska event.
The Tunguska event wipes out all the trees and everything like that. But it doesn't wipe out the Earth. And there's no impact crater. There's nothing.
It's. I mean,
So-
it literally acts like it's a 3.5.
The problem is the people who are studying this and the astronomers and all that. Well, it's got to be an impact, but there's no impact crater. Nobody could figure it out. But they missed the whole part that everything around us is electric. It's everything has even animals and everything. The creatures.
So God
Everything
knew what
has-
he was doing when he made everything.
Yes,
No,
exactly.
what?
So everybody's always sort of freaked out that there's going to be this big comet that hits the Earth and destroys it. But when in reality, when you've got that huge plasma plume, it actually creates these negative charges. You got a negative and a positive charge, and boom,
Yeah.
it's a protective measure that the Earth, and actually other planets have it too. And that is what we're going to experience in October. Now, what happens in October 2024? I have no idea what's going to happen. But we already did it. I know there's conspiracy theories about us being hacked with the phone thing. But there were 2 major solar flares that night at 3:34.
Oh, the recent AT&T.
Yes,
and
the
all
recent phone outage. Nobody talked about that. They just talked about maybe it was this or that. Nobody talked about that.
You know, it's funny because my wife, Adrienne, she actually found that fairly early. She actually found that something about a solar flare caused these outages. But then later on, when you went to go look at the story, it was, oh no, we had a computer glitch.
Yeah.
Or something like that.
Oh, I'm waiting for the Thunderbolts project video on that one. I'm hoping they do something on that because it's got to be something they're looking at.
Sure.
Very, very interesting stuff that they're doing. But yeah, I've learned so much about just energy, lightning, the Earth, all that stuff, all the different planets. I mean, now this is from somebody else, David Dubine, who was I don't know if you know him.
No.
He was
Name sounds
he used to buy coffee all around the world. And then he kind of went down the rabbit hole, and you could call him a conspiracy theorist, but I've learned a lot from him. He has a YouTube channel called Adapt 2030. So he's like, get ready for 2030.
I think that's French for truth seeker.
Yeah, probably. But he has a lot of interesting stuff on things like that. But he kind of traveled where he's just buying coffee, and he started seeing things with, the crops and problems with the crops. And he was getting worried, about not being able to get coffee and get supplies and things like that. And so he sort of went down this rabbit hole, and I think he moved to Tennessee, and he started sort of becoming, I don't know if you call it a prepper or something like that, but anyway, some sort of guy like that. But yeah, he got some chickens and goats and whatnot. I don't know. And but yeah, I've learned a lot from him because he has a lot of stuff that he sort of followed the Thunderbolts project, and he's the guy I kind of learned that from, where to find that with all that stuff. So that was very helpful. But yeah, he has a lot of good information on the planets and the planet alignment and things like that that's going on. I do know, and here's a question. I think he mentioned something about the planets being closer in history than what they are now. And I think that makes a lot of sense to me because there, on top of Saturn, there is a hexagon. Sorry. There's a hexagon on top of Saturn. So if you pull up Saturn, look at the top of it, there's a hexagon. How did ancient Mesopotamia know there was a hexagon on top of Saturn and they drew it on the walls?
The Anunnaki.
Yeah. Well,
sorry.
That's a different rabbit hole, but
I think that's friends for watchers.
Yeah, exactly. Were the gas giants closer?
Well, that makes a lot of sense because, one of the things that we are taught is that, space is always expanding, right? Like everything's expanding all the time. So, yeah, I mean, everything's probably further apart than it was. I mean, it makes sense, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, totally. So
yeah, it's just fascinating that some of this stuff we don't have answers for. We just lost a lot of this information. And here we're coming up on this major event. We've already had some sun flares that, knocked out phones, supposedly.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of people have different thoughts on that. We have an eclipse, and we got
red heifers.
No comment. And
that's right. We did it for you last week.
And you got the planets lining up in a certain way. Now, how important is a planet alignment? And you think about that, and you're like, in today's time, it's like we go to work, we do everything. We got our cell phones. We, more information than what it took to launch the spatial. Yeah, let's see what's on TikTok. All these different things. We go about our lives like that. Planets align. Who cares? Whatever.
Right.
But there was a time when the planets aligned and the stars pointed down to the earth for the king.
Yeah.
So the ancients knew how important the planet alignment was.
Clearly, no doubt about it.
And the wise men knew to follow the star, which took them a long time. Once they saw the star a long time before. Yeah. And it took them a long time. I think Jesus was like 3 years old or something by the time they got there. And he was in Jerusalem or Bethlehem by that time, something like that.
Yeah. Didn't we just have that event last year? Was that last year or the year before? Or we had the same event that happened, we believe happened at the same time as the wise men?
Possibly.
Because I think it's an alignment of Saturn and Jupiter.
Could be.
That makes it look like a star. I don't know.
Wouldn't have the answer for that one.
I think it was, but...
You remember what we're talking about?
Me being a skeptic, as I always am.
Yeah, who knows, right?
I was like, how could you tell unless they were closer? Mm-hmm. Because to me, it looked like a little dot.
It was a big dot, but yeah.
I mean...
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
I want to be, wow. And it wasn't, and I'm like... So back then, it would have been huge. I mean, if they were closer, it would have been huge.
Yeah.
That's like 2000. You figure,
They would have, because they knew that Saturn had rings. Now you tell me, can you see Saturn's rings?
Yeah, like you'd have to have something.
So, well, they had a telescope. Something. Really? Well, we don't see any evidence of that.
Yeah.
But it's possible the gas giants could have been closer then. They could have just been right there. Maybe they weren't so close, but they were close enough to see, and you could see.
Yeah, I don't know. It's
close
crazy.
enough like the moon or the sun.
Mars has got a war, so when Mars lines up and everybody sees Mars up there, and they're like, means war.
This is the perfect conversation to go from where we were last week. It doesn't seem like it on the surface, but it is.
It is, really is.
Because I knew it all these things are happening. And it's so strange.
Well, it's definitely a significant year. How significant and what it means, I have no idea. I'm a guy just writing fiction novels, so I'm a fiction guy, man. It's like I make stuff up. It's just for fun, So when
not this stuff.
Yeah, well, not this stuff. Well, you have to have. You can't write something. No,
you got
to.
Yeah,
if you don't know, because somebody's going to say, "Well, that can't happen." Somebody can't get hit by lightning and live. Well, yeah, they can. A lot of people get hit by lightning and live. And
so what did it feel like
for me? when me and Josh were outside,
Sparky.
we could not hear after it happened. We didn't know what had happened because we couldn't hear for probably 20 minutes. And we just looked at each other, and all the hairs on our arms were standing up, on our neck, everything, and we ran in the house. And it really shook us up. And when we got our hearing back, we went outside, and I'm like, what just happened there? And
there was burn marks or anything?
No. Holly said, well, it sounded like a boom. I'm like, okay.
A big boom.
It's a big boom.
If you've ever been around it, it
is massive.
It is shocking.
So yeah, it really freaked me out.
But
and I think even we have an uncle that was
Dan was struck by twice.
Yeah. Wow. Well, that's pretty unlucky.
Right?
But yes, Lightning Jack in the story, he gets struck every time he goes outside. But
67 times.
But he has someone build him a very interesting suit that allows him to live outside. And that is where the story comes into play. See? Because he's able to ride through the pumpkin patch and shock the pumpkins. And it's this great, wonderful, magical pumpkin that tastes really good.
So it's based on your zappy uncle.
Not quite, but I guess it could be. now that I know he was hit by lightning twice, I guess that could be.
I'm trying to find a picture. I managed out here. We were on the front porch here one time and just sitting out there. The storm was rolling in because out here you can see the storm coming for a long way away. We were sitting on the front porch, and I got so lucky. I happened to hit my camera on my phone right at the perfect time. And when the shutter snapped was right when the lightning came down.
Nice.
I mean, I couldn't try 1,000 times over and get it more perfect than when I got it that day.
I've been looking into like getting earth shoes. Have you seen this? It's like they've got copper infused in them so you can ground yourself.
God gave me 2 of those. I just call them feet. But
Well, I mean, so if you, because technically we should be walking around barefoot and being grounded to the earth.
People say. I'm glad I wasn't grounded when the lightning hit. I had some pretty heavy duty shoes on.
Right. Crazy.
I've heard a lot of that. I don't know if.
Yeah. And it's interesting that, they say copper, helps healing and getting in touch with the earth, since the earth is electric and we're electric. Mm-hmm. And so all of this just really makes sense. I mean,
I am curious about why, it's like, okay, Pharaohs and the Egyptians, they were all into cats and all that stuff. And every time I touch my cat, man, it shocks my finger so bad.
Really?
Is that what they were doing? These guys are just kind of messes.
I think they just like cats, but
I think so too. But yeah, it's like
mine does too.
It's the same thing. Maybe
they weren't big enough to carry him around like Gilgamesh.
Yeah, that's true.
Gotta have a little kitty.
Pretty big guy.
Gotta have a little kitty. You can't carry it around. So what are some other things that you've kind of found through this whole research, man? It's just fascinating that you got on this, and it's just amazing. Like, I think there's so much stuff that has been lost to us, and it's still there, but man, you got to dig to get it.
I think a lot of it is people don't necessarily care to know.
Yeah,
they're happy living their life, and so and a lot of people who sort of dig into this stuff and they start learning things and they start questioning things, the norms, or questioning the norms, then they become conspiracy theorists or oddballs. Or
who came up with that term, by the way?
Who came up?
This a conspiracy theory?
Mel Gibson?
Conspiracy
I'm just kidding.
The CIA did.
Oh, probably.
No, that's a true story.
I can believe that.
Yeah, they came up with that to discredit, because that came out the Kennedy assassination, right? That was what they did to discredit everybody.
So I was thinking that with the alignment, and if it was, let's say, during Egypt's time, it would make sense that it was. Can I say, is it? Well, does it happen during rise and falls of nations?
Yeah, but if you notice,
is there a correlation between this?
Yes.
According to what Jesus, I'm just going right with what Jesus said. He said immediately after those days. So the nation falls, and then you got the sun is darkened.
Because we're 9 years later.
Yes, 9 years later. So he's saying now for the other ones, it could have happened before, it could have happened after. It's not real specific in those chapters that's talking about that. It just says this is going to happen because in the heavens everything is significant. All this stuff is significant. God is very orderly. That's why worship should be very orderly. Because God is very orderly. I mean, when you look at a lot of the requirements, the Levitical requirements, you can't have different types of clothing sewn in. You got to sow your field a certain way. Everything is very orderly, and it's all for a purpose. So why would the planets be any different?
Yeah.
My next question.
Everything would be very orderly in the way that it happens.
Now, do you think I think it has to do with more like over there, like but when I say prophecy, things discussed in the Bible has to do with the promised land and things like that.
I totally disagree.
But my question, no.
But yes, I understand what you're saying.
The love of a brother.
On that side of it, yes, I know what you're saying.
Do you think America could be the one that falls? To me, it's all pointing.
It's all speculation, but obviously, we're the ones that's getting the brunt of the eclipse. It could be.
Isn't it weird that it's making an X across us from the 2017?
Not weird, scary. Very scary.
I say weird, but
the thing is, and
that we seem like we are on the tip of everything happening.
Yes,
like with I'll say with aliens, with everything in the news, we are involved.
We go about our life, and a lot of times are not thinking about anything. We're like, we're going to do this today, and we're going to do that today, or we're going to do this tomorrow. And as a nation, we're just going to conquer this. But Napoleon said, "Man proposes, God disposes."
Yeah.
So we can go through our whole life and plan. And even though everything's going on around us, and we're like, whatever with the plans, I don't know, whatever. If you're going to live like Homer Simpson, you're going to have a really hard life.
No,
because there are a lot of things that happen around us that are significant.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And we do not even fully grasp how significant they are. And in one way, I do think there are some things with the ancient Holy Land that have some significance, but not in the way that a lot of people do. A lot of people are waiting for a new temple and different things, and to find the right stuff for sacrifices and all that stuff. And I do not think that has any significance whatsoever with what's going on with the planet alignment and anything else. It has absolutely nothing to do with it. Those days are over. And I think what we're experiencing now is significant, but in a different way. And what that way is, I don't know. But I do know 2030 is very significant because the people who are sort of I would call them the elite of our world and the money controllers and things like that. They have certain goals and things that they want to accomplish, and each nation has a goal they want to accomplish, and the people have a goal they want to accomplish. And when you look at all the farmer revolts around the world, you know that something significant is happening. And to what extent that is, I have no idea. It's just setting up to be a very strange thing that we're heading into. And everybody in the world is going to be impacted. In what way? Nobody can even really know. We're just sitting here looking at it as things happen, and we're just going, wow. It's like watching, I wouldn't really call it a train wreck, but it's watching a big event unfold, and we have no idea what the end result's going to be or where it's going to take us, but it will impact us in ways that it will change everybody's life. Yeah. And I mean, you have some of the farmers now who have said, well, we're not going to plant. I can't remember if that's Spain or France or something. Yeah. They're not going to plant. And I mean, they're dumping their grain.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Really? I haven't heard this.
Yeah,
they're dumping their grain everywhere.
Streets, just dumping it.
Yeah. And I believe Australia, they're not going to be able to plant much this year because of the Tonga eruption. In Brazil, I think there's a lot of issues with planting down there.
Ash in Australia, is that
the
one?
ash
layer.
Which is, I don't know how significant it is or how much it's impacted, but it has impacted some. You've got the war that's going on. All these different things are taking place, and I know everybody goes to the Gog and Magog and all that stuff in Revelation, but that I just don't know how much you can tie a lot of that into what's happening, because what we're going through right now, I think there's only a few prophecies that would really be left to describe this, and they're not what a lot of other people are thinking about. So
what are those? Come on. Throw us a bone.
It might be another topic.
Cool. We'll make part 2. Go.
Yeah. But it's we're all living it together.
Yeah, we are.
And how much are we going to be impacted by it? I don't know.
Yeah.
I think here in the U.S. we've got our own problems, and aside from everything else that we're doing around the world, we've got our own issues here. Yeah. And we don't know how that's going to play out either. So we just have to kind of get up every day and do what we do. And
I think that's the thing. That's the important thing to take away from everything, right? I mean, like, let's face it, the conversation this week, sure ties in very well with what we did last week. And those conversations aren't cheery, because if it's where it seems like to me we're headed, it's not good. But at the same time, Christ told us, hey, here's what to look for. Here's the things to watch for. But man, don't live in a spirit of fear, right? Like, don't be blind and don't be asleep, because I think there's a lot of people just completely asleep at the wheel. Mm-hmm. We're comfortable, we're rich, relatively speaking, in the grand scheme of the world. And we stick our heads down in the ground and we don't pay any attention to stuff. And he's telling us don't do that either. But don't have a spirit of fear about everything, man. And I think we've all experienced people in our lives that starts to dictate their everyday as this huge spirit of fear. And that's not what we should be doing either. Now, I have a question for you. The 2030 date that you spoke of, or were you just speaking of that from the perspective of that seems to be a lot of the dates that are mentioned for them for their goals?
I think
or is there something that you're picking else that you're picking?
Well, I think it's very significant when you look at some of the scriptural things with the 2,000 years that would be 2 days type thing. That's maybe another show that we'll have to have you back for, because I think that's a very interesting thing with if you.
And just for clarity for everybody that's listening to us, what we're talking about is I don't remember where it is biblically.
Peter. Yeah, that would be
Peter. That's right. Yeah.
Chapter 3, verse 21.
Where Peter says, and I think it might be some other place too. I think it might be another place in the Bible where it talks about too. But
that might be chapter 2.
The reference is 1,000 years
is a day
to the Lord.
Right.
And Moses also for us is a day to the Lord.
Moses also said the same thing. So there's two places where it says 1,000 years is equivalent to a day.
Yeah, in the book of Jubilees, it is like super clear.
Right.
It's like it doesn't mince any words about what that means.
Well, and then when you look at after the flood of Noah, it said man's days would be 120 years. Mm-hmm. So did that also mean that, man's days would be 120 years, so he's going to live to be 120 years old type thing? Or was that also 120 Jubilee years? Because when you go to 2030 and you go back to that time, that's 120 Jubilee years. So it's very significant right there. Another thing that's a little bit creepy is I think it is September, which is Sept is 7, and not 9.
Yeah, our calendars
are messed up. And I know a lot of people say, "Oh, it's the 9th month." No, it's actually the 7th.
Yeah.
I tell you what,
we won't get into all that.
All you need to do is go back to the book of Daniel and look at prophecy, and Revelation as well. I think it talks about 1,260 days, right?
Yeah.
Well, and clearly it's stated for 1,260 days in Revelation. I know specifically is how long the two witnesses will be here prophesying, and when you take 1,260, because that's it's 3.5 years is exactly how it's stated. So when you take 1260 and you divide it by 3.5, it ain't 365. Right. It's dead on 360.
Yeah, and I have a completely different view on that than most people. So
interesting.
Yeah, I don't. We can go into that another time. But yeah, one thing that is very significant.
He's wanting to come back. That's what this is.
Forget time. One thing that's significant is when Jesus went to heal Lazarus, he specifically waited 2 days before he left. And then after 2 days, they came back and said, he's died. And Jesus wept. And then he said, he said this before, that he is doing this for them, for us. He's waiting for Lazarus to die for us. 2 days later, he left and went to Lazarus and then brought him back from the dead. That's not the only time he waited 2 days. Many times in Scripture, he waited 2 days before he did something. Why is he waiting 2 days?
2,000 years.
It's a clue into this. And you say, well, wait a minute. Jesus specifically said in Matthew 23, we cannot know the day or the hour.
Doesn't say the year.
That's true. But he also was, and this is where the writer in me comes in, he was not using future tense. He was using present tense. So he was basically saying this to the people then.
That's what it says in this. People.
It is a present tense statement that is being made. Now, I'm not saying I can know what hour or anything like that. But what I do think is significant is Jesus called out the different things, like, saying, hey, you guys can tell when it's going to rain. And he chastised the Pharisees.
He uses a fig tree.
Yeah, he's like, the fig trees. Well, you can tell all this stuff, but you're not paying attention to what's going on around you. So there are significant things going on. I don't know how significant they are. I'm just saying it looks pretty significant. Hosea said that 2 days, I think it's 2 days we will suffer. The third day we will be healed, made new. So that's kind of odd. The woman at the well, it was, what was it? He said she had 6 husbands, and even the one she has now is not her husband. So 6,000 years, and then one other one. I'm just saying it's very, very interesting when you start to look at all that stuff.
Have you found that, because I think it's really obvious for us that God is very layered in the things that he does, and the things that are in the Bible for us. It's very layer cake, if you will. But the thing that I think for me that I found over the last couple of years, especially as I've dug more and more into Christ's words, it's the same thing, which makes sense because if you've seen the Father, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father, right? Christ, I think, was very layered in what he said and did as well. And it's funny that you mentioned the past tense. He wasn't talking, he was talking, present tense, not future tense. We also flip around what he says when he says, surely this generation will not pass away before these things happen. And we typically tend to read that and go, well, he's talking to the disciples, about they won't pass away. So how's that possible? Because these things, they passed away and these things didn't happen. But that's not the proper tense that he's speaking in that particular phrase. He's talking about the future, and he's saying the generation of people that this will happen to will not pass away before these things happen. At least it seems that way to me.
I have to respectfully disagree. I have views that are probably not in the norm.
Yeah, that's fine.
And the reason I have those is I look at it this way. First off, there's no difference between Jew or Gentile.
Yep.
Okay. So you have to swallow that one and go, we're all one in Christ. You have to first accept that. Everything in the Old Testament had one purpose and one purpose only, and that was Christ. Everything. We learn he is a jealous God in the Old Testament. Everything that he set up was for his coming. Everything else, prophecies, all those things, they sell a lot of books, but they're full of lies. If someone is making a ton of money off of something, who do you think is behind that idea? The father of lies.
Yeah.
Because what is the two options you get? Serve money or serve God. So you got all these
Can't have
guys.
two masters.
You can't have two masters. Didn't say Satan. It said money.
Yeah.
So very, very tricky there. If you're bringing in a ton of money off prophecy and you're living it up, you're probably telling lies. And that's just, I'm just saying that from a personal viewpoint, but people can believe whatever they want.
Yeah.
I believe everything that we're heading towards right now specifically is towards one event and only one and nothing else. There's none of these other things that are going to take place. There'll never be another thing in the other place. Won't go there, but it's all setting up for one event. And
what do you think that event is?
That would be the return. There is nothing else. There is nothing else.
Christ's return.
His return is it. There is nothing else.
I agree.
And all the other things that take place.
I respectfully agree.
Yeah. Appreciate that. Matthew 24 is tricky because a lot of people want that to be prophecy, for the future. But part of it is, but after, I believe, verse 34.
Yeah, the first part is because you kind of have two parts there.
Two parts there.
Yeah,
exactly.
Because he's talking about what's going to happen in the near future.
Right.
And then the other part of it is going to be what's going to happen.
The days of Noah, those things like that.
So
exactly.
Mary and I, we discussed that quite a bit because I get stuck on this generation. I'm like, he's talking to those people.
Yeah.
I said, he's not talking to us. He's talking to them.
Correct.
And I can't, for the longest time, I couldn't reconcile that because it's like, well, they said this, but Jesus said this, but I understand things can happen.
Unless there is some apostle somewhere still alive.
Right, yeah.
Jesus wasn't lying.
Could be John.
He died. We know they all died. All of them died.
Yeah.
Most
of them were martyred.
And this is where I'm going to go. Ben might know where I'm going with this, but no man ever walked this earth that did not die. So the whole lie of Enoch and Elijah going to heaven is not true. It is not in the Bible. If Elijah went to heaven, how did he send a letter to the king 5 years later? Was that a different Elijah? Why would we learn about a different Elijah somewhere in the Bible that has no purpose? Oh, that was a different guy. Well, why was he writing the king? Who was this Elijah that we now know 5 years later? And Enoch, well, we know where Enoch went. He had a job to do. So no, he did die, but it was after he had to go do his deal with the Watchers. He had to go do that and document that, but he eventually died. And the reason I say that is because
it said he never died, he was taken.
No. You got to go back to original Hebrew language on that. If they didn't die, the book of Hebrews is telling us a lie, because the book of Hebrews says all these men died.
Are you talking now? Where are you talking at?
The Hall of Faith.
Oh.
Yes, chapter 11. All these men died. It doesn't exclude Enoch and Elijah. It says all these men died. It is appointed once to man, for man to live, and then the judgment. So you basically get one life and then the judgment. Okay? So how did these guys get out of that? Well, they didn't. How they did not die is, if you fully understand, they did not die the death of a prophet, because they were both prophets. And Jesus, when he was talking about Jerusalem, he said, oh, Jerusalem, Jerusalem, you kill the prophets. He's like, oh, why are you going back to Jerusalem? I have to, because that's where they kill the prophets.
Yeah. Interesting.
So, yes, I do not believe that Enoch and Elijah.
Oh, man, come on.
I am sorry. I apologize, Ben. I know that. This is why my wife says I ruin everything. There was this show that was called Adam Ruins Everything. She's like, that is you. You ruin every single thing. I'm like, I can't help it, because all I'm looking for is the actual facts in the Bible. And what the facts say is Jesus said, all die. So does that mean Jesus lied? Jesus can't lie, or the whole Bible means nothing.
Yeah.
those who wrote the other books, they can't lie. They were inspired by the Holy Spirit. So they can't lie or everything means nothing. So the things they wrote have to hold weight.
Yeah.
So
So
go ahead.
going back to Enoch.
Oh boy.
So it does say that he is the scribe of God.
Oh, yeah.
Do you think he in the afterlife was the scribe, or do you think it was just then?
I don't know. His ghost didn't get to come back like Elijah's did on the Mount of Transfiguration. So
We got a question.
Here's another thing. How in the world? So Moses' ghost is there, and
How'd they know?
Elijah's ghost in there. Well, Elijah didn't die. Why does he have a ghost?
Well, I don't think it says ghost, does it?
Yes, it does. There's the spirit. It was basically Elijah, and what else would it be?
My question is, how'd they know who it was?
That's an interesting point.
You're talking about
The
another whole.
other interesting
topic.
point that someone did point out to me too the other day was, okay, because you can make the argument, okay, that clearly it says that he was taken, as far as Enoch, he was taken. And we have the story of
Right.
Elijah, obviously in the chariot.
Taken up in chariot.
Yep, okay.
Was that a UFO?
No.
I'm just throwing that. I'm just having fun.
Oh my goodness. But the interesting thing is in the Transfiguration, okay, so you've got Elijah, which makes sense, right? But would not Moses be in Sheol at that particular time? So how did he get there?
They were brought there.
Exactly.
Yes.
It's just interesting that,
But they were brought there for a reason, and that's because Moses represents what?
The law,
The law. Elijah represents what?
the prophets,
The prophets. Who are the two witnesses that lie in the street?
the law and the prophets.
The law and the prophets are the witnesses. And who embodied the law and the prophets? And they killed him. And for 3 days, and then he came back.
Yeah.
Jesus. Jesus said he fulfills the law. He was a prophet. He was the
The
embodiment.
greatest prophet, according to John.
Greatest. That's exactly right. So he was the one who is the witness. He was the two witnesses they killed.
Would it? Oh, well, I could.
They killed the law and they killed the prophets because Jesus is the embodiment of God. He is literally God's voice with flesh on it. And where did the law come from? God's voice.
I was going to say something, but I will just keep that.
I think, okay. Things are the thing that when you get into some of this with Scripture, people need to expand their mind a little bit.
Yeah.
Instead of looking at just the hard numbers of things and saying, this is the way it is because I bought this book and this guy said this is what's going to happen. Is that the Bible? No.
No.
So why is that going to happen?
Yeah.
And how far did they expand their mind to this? We spend so much time reading the Bible and putting God in a box instead of saying, wait, this God is beyond what we can actually
Way beyond.
think in our mind. Okay. It's just, it blows me. Have you ever seen it's on, I think the Hubble telescope took a picture. It's like what's it called?
The eye of God.
Cat's Eye Nebula.
God
or whatever.
Nebula.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So that's just crazy.
Isn't it beautiful?
Man. Oh,
Yeah.
It's wild.
It's incredible.
Gives me chills. When you look at it, it's got a face sitting on a throne.
Yeah.
Wow. That's crazy stuff. But anyway, one thing you mentioned, which brings me back to the lightning and the plasma, is a lot of things that you're talking about UFOs. Nobody counts ball lightning. Nobody's ever seen ball lightning that we know of, but it's happened. There's people alive today who've seen it, but nobody's seen it that we know. Nobody's seen it.
Yeah.
You could interview everybody in your state, and they've probably not seen ball lightning. But if you research it, it's happened throughout history. And lightning, it's where lightning will form a ball and it will travel through the sky in a sphere so fast, and it'll move around like this, and it'll go wherever it wants, and it'll kill you if you touch it. Everybody's like, UFOs.
Yeah.
Is it ball lightning?
I know this.
Nobody thinks that through.
This is a weird. Maria got up one night in the middle of the night. She went to the bathroom. And she's in the bathroom. She sees this thing. It's like a big ball orb just come through the wall.
That's ball lightning.
It was like right in front of her in the bathroom. She said it was so close she could reach out and touch it, but she was like, I better not. She just watched it.
That is actually ball lightning. No kidding.
And then she just kind of like
That's amazing. I would have never thought that anybody I know would have.
And she said it just kind of like hovered there.
Yes, that's ball lightning.
And she said it just kind of like, I think, faded away, kind of just sort of.
If it hits a charge, it will disappear. If it makes contact, it will go away. It is no different than a tree getting hit by lightning and blowing up. Only ball lightning is floating. It has no contact with anything. If you touch it, it will kill you. There was a guy that he was on it.
She was scared to touch it.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I didn't know that happened. So that's cool. I actually know somebody that experienced ball lightning. But yes, there was a guy that he was on an aircraft.
You can't believe her, though.
She's been on the show. Yes, you can.
Oh, yeah, I forgot. Yeah, she's all right then.
There was a guy. He was on an airplane, and he was in like the data center area. The plane got hit by lightning, and there was this massive white ball there, and he couldn't move. He was froze, and the ball was coming towards him. He didn't know what it was. He was terrified. But it's like he had no ability to move his body because there was just different charges taking place within his body, and he just couldn't deal with it. Well, after it happened, it touched something and discharged and sparked off of the data stuff that was in the plane. Guy thought he was going crazy until he started doing research, and finally he found somebody that explained what ball lightning was, and it's like he thought he was seeing aliens or something like that.
Yeah.
And they explained everything to him. He's like, my mind was messed up. The electrical energy in his brain was a mess. He couldn't think. He couldn't move. And he was so relieved to find out, hey, this is actually a real thing. This is ball light. It will travel through a wall in a building. It could travel through that window and it would float around here, and it could mess you up so bad you can't move away from it, and it hits you and you're dead. And you're like, oh, what happened? Well, we don't know. They're just dead.
Whoops.
Do you think when someone dies, their electrical charge goes out?
Well, it's interesting you say that.
Because when we were there with Maria's grandma when she died, and we seen this like glowing thing. It was kind of like a light coming through like a prism, kind of sort of, and it was like a ball, but it was on the wall, and we couldn't find. I mean, there was nothing. No reflection.
That was making room, yeah.
Yes. And it just was like there for a few minutes and it just kind of like floated away.
I don't know. You'd have to be there for that. But I do know when the sperm goes into the egg and they're watching it under a microscope, a flash of light occurs.
Yeah. We are the light of the world.
So,
wow. That's crazy.
That's interesting stuff there. So, but ball lightning, there's so many different sources of lightning and plasma electrical energy around the planet. The lightning sprites. I've never seen one, but they got pictures in Texas. So it's really fascinating. But there's just my brain's fading now. But there's a lot of different types of electrical energy. And I think a lot of times it's discounted and stuff when people think about aliens and things like that. I think that
too quick to jump to that because it's popular.
Yeah. It's. They think that's what it is, but I think some of those videos you get fighter pilots. They show some light just shooting across the sky. It moves at so fast of a speed. Well, how fast is lightning? And it's done. It's already hit the ground.
Yeah, and
it's over with already. So what would ball lightning do? It'd do anything it wants because it has no connection to anything. It's just zipping around all over the place, and nobody's like, I'm not talking about ball lightning. Never heard of that. That's crazy. Well, no, it's actually real.
It's a thing.
It's a real thing.
Wow.
Yeah. You'll have to ask Maria about that.
Yeah, I'll have to ask her about that. That's pretty amazing. I didn't think I knew anybody. I was like, we could interview all these people. Never find anybody. No.
You're welcome.
But it does happen.
$400.
Darn
Checks payable to the Tinfoil Hat Club.
I'll give you this here mug.
Oh, hey, thanks, man. You're a real giver. Hey, man, this has been fantastic. Thanks.
It's been fun.
This has been great. We'll have to. We opened up a lot of worms that were like, well, that's a show. That's another show. So I think you're gonna have to slide back over and have another appearance. We'll figure something else to talk about that won't threaten your career.
Okay. Sounds good.
But hey, man, thanks for.
I love the government, and I've never once tried to end myself in any way whatsoever.
Sure, I'm gonna need you
say that every week.
Yeah, I'm gonna need you to clean up the lie that you're getting everywhere right now when you're done. So no, but man, this has been great. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
All right. With that, we will wrap it up for this week, and we'll bid you adieu until next time on The Foil. Take care.
Bye.